Norway. Is one of the richest countries on Earth. Yet if you walk through its streets, you might never realize it. There are no endless rows of supercars, no billionaire mansions dominating the skyline, no cities obsessed with showing off wealth. Instead, you'll find quiet neighborhoods, fishing villages, people riding bicycles to work, and even a king who's been known to use public transport. But beneath that ordinary appearance lies something extraordinary. In Norway, anyone can legally look up your income, your wealth, and even your tax records online, and almost nobody thinks that's unusual. At the same time, the Norwegian government quietly owns parts of thousands of the world's largest companies: Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Nestle, Samsung. Its sovereign wealth fund has grown so massively that it's become the largest investment fund in human history. So here's the question. How can one of the wealthiest nations ever created look so ordinary? Most countries become louder after they become rich. Norway became quieter. Hidden behind that silence is one of the most remarkable national decisions ever made. A decision that may have solved a problem that has destroyed countless resource-rich nations throughout history. But that story didn't begin with oil. It began with one of the harshest landscapes in Europe. For centuries, Norway was a country of towering mountains, deep fjords, brutal winters, and tiny communities struggling to survive on land that offered very little. Life here demanded discipline. It rewarded patience, and it taught generations never to waste what they had. Those values would eventually shape one of the greatest financial success stories the world has ever seen. Because when Norway suddenly became unimaginably rich, it made a choice that almost no other nation would have made. To understand why that choice changed everything, we have to go back to the beginning. Long before oil, wealth in Norway had a smell: salt, seaweed, tar, and drying fish. For centuries, those scents drifted through a harbour called Bergen. Today, it's one of Norway's most beautiful cities. Colourful wooden buildings lean gently toward the water. Rain falls more than 200 days each year. Tourists wander narrow alleyways with cameras in hand. But beneath that postcard beauty lies one of Europe's forgotten financial capitals. During the Middle Ages, Bergen was not famous because of gold, or silver, or spices. It became rich because of something almost nobody thinks about today. Cod. Every winter, millions of Arctic cod migrated south toward the Norwegian coast. Local fishermen caught them, then hung them outside in freezing winds. The cold removed the moisture. The fish hardened naturally. No salt, no smoke, no chemicals, just Arctic air. The result was stockfish, food that could survive for years without refrigeration. In medieval Europe, that was not just food, it was survival. Ships carried Bergen's cod across the continent. Germany, England, Portugal, Italy, everywhere. Entire trading networks depended on it. Money poured into Bergen. Merchants became incredibly wealthy. But something unusual happened. They didn't build palaces. They didn't compete to build the biggest homes. They did not try to display their success. Walk through the old harbour today, and you notice something strange. The warehouses are impressive. The city itself is impressive. But the merchants largely disappeared into ordinary wooden houses. Their wealth strengthened the community instead of advertising the individual. That pattern would repeat itself again and again for centuries. Because Norway's greatest export was never just fish. It was restraint. The people who traded here understood something many societies never do. Money can make a nation stronger, or it can slowly destroy it. Norway had not discovered oil yet, but it had already begun developing the mindset that would one day protect one of the greatest fortunes in human history. The question is, where did that mindset come from? To answer it, we have to leave the city behind, travel inland, where the mountains split apart and reveal one of Earth's greatest geological masterpieces, a place so deep that the tallest skyscrapers in the world could disappear beneath its surface. And standing beside it, you finally begin to understand why Norwegians think the way they do. There are places on Earth so enormous they make human ambition feel almost ridiculous. Fjord is one of them. For more than 200 kilometers, this immense scar slices through the mountains of western Norway before finally reaching the sea. Stand on its edge, and you're looking into the deepest fjord on Earth, more than 1,300 meters of water, deep enough to swallow the world's tallest skyscrapers and still leave room above them. On calm mornings, the waters become perfectly still. The mountains reflect so completely that the horizon disappears. For a moment, you can't tell where the world ends and where its reflection begins. It feels less like standing on Earth and more like standing inside a painting. But this landscape was not created gently. It was carved through violence. For millions of years, glaciers the size of entire cities crawled across Norway. Ice nearly 3 kilometers thick, slowly grinding solid mountains into valleys again and again and again. Each ice age cutting deeper than the last. When the glaciers finally disappeared, they left behind something almost impossible. Mountains rising straight out of the sea, waterfalls falling hundreds of meters, cliffs that seem to have no bottom. Nature on a scale that refuses to acknowledge human beings. And yet, people chose to live here. Look carefully along these cliffs. Tiny farms cling to narrow shelves of land. Some can only be reached by boat. Others once required ladders lowered from above. For generations, families lived balanced between mountain and water. One wrong step could mean a fall hundreds of meters below. Old stories tell of parents tying ropes around their small children while working outside, not because life here was unusual, but because it was normal. Imagine growing up in a place like this. You do not conquer the mountain. You do not defeat nature. You do not believe you're more important than the landscape. You simply learn your place within it. That lesson passed quietly from generation to generation. Long before schools, governments, long before oil, humility was not taught here. It was unavoidable. Many countries built their identity through conquest. Norway built its identity through endurance. The mountains always won. The weather always had the final word. The sea decided whether you ate. The land taught patience. Winters taught preparation. And every spring, survival felt earned. That way of thinking became deeply embedded in Norwegian culture. Even today, centuries later, you can still see it. Not in museums, not in monuments, but in the way Norwegians design roads, build cities, manage money, and even judge success itself. Because the mountains never disappeared, people simply learned to live beside them. And nowhere is that relationship more visible than on one extraordinary road that climbs almost straight into the sky. Most countries build roads to dominate nature. Norway builds roads to negotiate with it. There is perhaps no better example than Trollstigen, the troll's ladder. From above, it barely looks real. 11 impossibly tight hairpin turns stacked one above another, climbing a near vertical wall of rock. Each bend carefully carved into the mountainside, each retaining wall built from hand-cut stone. Completed nearly a century ago, they still hold against snow, ice, landslides, and time itself. Halfway up, a waterfall crashes beneath a narrow bridge. Mist fills the air. The roar of the water overwhelms every other sound. For a moment, the mountain reminds you who's really in control. But Trollstigen is not remarkable because it's difficult. It's remarkable because of what its engineers chose not to do. They could have blasted a straight tunnel through the mountain. They had the technology, they had the money. Instead, they followed the shape of the mountain already given them. The road bends because the land bends. It climbs because the mountain allows it to climb. Even modern viewing platforms follow the same philosophy. Minimal, simple, almost invisible. They frame the landscape. They don't compete with it. In Norway, the scenery is always the main character. Human achievement quietly steps aside. And you begin to notice something extraordinary. The richer Norway became, the less interested it seemed in proving what it could build. Instead of constructing monuments to itself, it invested in making nature easier to experience. Roads, trails, bridges, tunnels, infrastructure that disappears into the landscape. Power without spectacle. Capability without ego. That idea keeps returning. The merchant who built no palace, the farmer who never claimed victory over the mountain, the road that bends instead of forcing its way through. Each story seems unrelated, but together they reveal something much larger. Norway had developed an instinct. Whenever faced with immense power, its first reaction was not display, it was restraint. And then, history handed the country a test unlike anything it had ever faced. Beneath the freezing waters of the North Sea lay enough oil to change Norway forever. The question wasn't whether Norway would become rich. That was inevitable. The real question was whether wealth would change Norway, or whether Norway would change wealth itself. The answer would become one of the most remarkable financial experiments in human history. Most countries dream of discovering oil. Very few survive it. History is filled with nations that struck black gold and watched everything else slowly fall apart. The money came quickly, too quickly. Governments spent wildly, corruption exploded, industries outside oil collapsed, prices soared, politics became toxic. Economists eventually gave this pattern a name: the resource curse, a gift that behaves like a curse. By the late 20th century, the pattern was so common that many believed it was almost impossible to escape. Then Norway entered the story. 3 days before Christmas, an offshore drilling platform in the North Sea prepared for one final attempt. The company had already spent enormous sums. Some engineers believed the field was empty. Failure seemed almost certain. Then the drill hit oil. Not a little, an astonishing amount. The Ekofisk field would become one of the largest offshore oil discoveries in history. Within months, everything changed. Foreign companies rushed in, investment poured into Norway, government revenues exploded. For a country of barely 5 million people, the scale of wealth was almost unimaginable. Suddenly, Norway faced the same temptation that had transformed and often ruined other resource-rich nations. Spend now, or think centuries ahead? Most governments choose today. Norway chose people who had not even been born yet. Imagine inheriting billions of dollars and telling yourself you cannot spend it. That is essentially what Norway did. Instead of flooding the economy with oil money, Parliament made a decision so unusual that economists still teach it today. Every extra dollar earned from oil would be separated from everyday government spending. Instead, it would be invested, not inside Norway, across the world. Stocks, bonds, real estate, thousands of companies, dozens of countries. One enormous portfolio, owned collectively by the Norwegian people. The goal was not simply to make money. It was to protect Norway from becoming dependent on oil. If too much oil money stayed inside the country, prices would rise. Salaries would surge, factories would struggle to compete, innovation would slow. Everything outside the oil industry would gradually weaken. Many countries had already experienced exactly that. Norway refused to repeat their mistake. Instead, it exported the money while keeping the ownership. A brilliantly simple idea. One that almost nobody had tried on this scale before. Today, that decision has created something extraordinary. Norway's sovereign wealth fund has grown into the largest of its kind on Earth. Its value has climbed into trillions of dollars. It owns shares in thousands of companies across more than 60 countries. In fact, there's a good chance you've used products today from businesses partly owned by Norway. Your phone, your computer, your groceries, your retirement fund may even invest alongside it. Yet, almost nobody notices. Because Norway never behaves like an empire. It rarely uses its wealth to dominate, it rarely threatens, it rarely boasts. It simply invests, patiently, quietly, year after year. The country became one of the world's biggest shareholders without acting like one. But perhaps the most astonishing part is that Norway still refuses to spend most of it. Think about that. Imagine having access to one of history's largest fortunes while roads need repairs, schools need funding, politicians want new projects, and elections happen every few years. Most governments would eventually give in. Norway created rules specifically designed to prevent that temptation. Only a small percentage of the fund's expected annual return can be used in the national budget. The principle remains untouched. The fortune itself belongs just as much to future generations as it does to people living today. Imagine planting a tree knowing you will never sit beneath its shade. That's how Norway treats its wealth, not as an inheritance, but as a responsibility. There's one story that captures the spirit of this entire system. The person trusted to oversee one of the largest investment funds in history does not arrive surrounded by motorcades, or private security, or luxury cars. He rides a bicycle. Think about that image. Trillions of dollars. A simple bike. It feels almost absurd until you understand Norway. The bicycle is not the surprising part. It would be surprising if he didn't ride one, because this country never wanted wealth to change how people see themselves. Money was meant to strengthen society, not separate people from it, and that's the difference. The oil created enormous wealth, but the wealth never became Norway's identity. It remained simply another resource to be managed carefully. Which raises the question, if ordinary Norwegians rarely show their wealth, what does life actually look like inside one of the richest societies ever built? For that answer, we need to travel 1,000 kilometers north to a chain of islands where millionaires still hang fish to dry, just as their ancestors did hundreds of years ago. "800 kilometers north of Oslo, the landscape begins to feel impossible. Mountains don't rise behind the sea, they rise straight out of it. Sharp granite peaks, older than almost every living thing on Earth, burst directly from crystal clear Arctic water. Below them, small red fishing cabins cling to the shoreline as if they've always belonged there. This is Lofoten, and if Norway has a soul, many people believe it lives here. During summer, the sun refuses to set. Midnight arrives, yet daylight still washes across the mountains. Children play outside, fishing boats continue working, birds keep flying. Time itself begins to feel strangely broken. Then winter arrives, and the opposite happens. For weeks, the sun barely climbs above the horizon. Darkness settles over the islands. Until, suddenly, green ribbons of light begin dancing across the sky. The northern lights. Silent, slow, almost unreal. It's one of the few places on Earth where the night sky can make people forget to speak. But despite all this beauty, Lofoten was never built for tourists. It exists because of one fish, the cod. Every winter, millions of Arctic cod return to these waters to spawn, exactly as they have done for thousands of years. The fishermen know the rhythm almost instinctively. Boats leave before sunrise. Nets disappear beneath icy waves. Hours later, they return heavy with silver. Then comes a scene that has barely changed since the Vikings. Thousands of fish hang from towering wooden racks, drying naturally in the freezing Arctic air. No factories, no chemicals, just wind, cold, and patience. The same process that made Bergen wealthy centuries ago still continues today. But here's where the story becomes surprising. Many of these fishermen are genuinely wealthy. Their boats can cost millions of dollars. Fishing quotas are among the most valuable assets in Norway. A successful season can earn more than many lawyers, engineers, or executives. Yet if you meet these fishermen in town, you'd probably never guess it. They drive ordinary pickup trucks, live in modest homes, wear weathered jackets, shop at the same grocery stores as everyone else. There's almost no visible difference between the millionaire and the neighbor. To much of the world, that feels strange. In Norway, it feels normal. Because wealth here carries an unspoken rule. Money should improve your life, not announce it. Eventually, Norway gave that rule a name. Nearly a century ago, a Danish-Norwegian writer published a novel. Inside it, he described a fictional town where people followed 10 unwritten rules. The most famous was simple. Do not think you are better than everyone else. The story was satire, but something unexpected happened. People recognized themselves. Over time, those fictional rules became known as the Law of Janta. No government passed it. No police enforces it. No court can punish you for breaking it. Yet it quietly shapes everyday life. Boasting is uncomfortable. Showing off feels unnecessary. Status matters less than contribution. Success is respected, but humility is expected. That's why public tax records never caused outrage. That's why wealthy business owners often dress like everyone else. It's why millionaires still stand beside fishermen at the local grocery store. The greatest compliment is not, "Look how successful I am." It's, "You would never know." For outsiders, this can be difficult to understand. But for Norwegians, it's simply another form of trust. A society where nobody feels compelled to prove they're more important than everyone else. Yet there is one place where even humility meets something larger than itself. For beyond these islands, past the Arctic Circle, lies the edge of Norway, a place where roads disappear, polar bears outnumber people, and humanity has built one of the most extraordinary vaults on Earth. Keep traveling north, past mainland Norway, past the Arctic Circle, past the places most maps bother to label. Eventually you reach Svalbard, a frozen archipelago drifting between Europe and the North Pole. This is one of the northernmost permanently inhabited places on Earth. Here, winter doesn't simply arrive, it takes over. For months, the sun never rises. Darkness becomes the landscape. Temperatures plunge far below freezing. The sea fills with drifting ice. The mountains fall completely silent. People who live here don't carry rifles because they hunt. They carry rifles because polar bears do hunt. Outside the settlements, humans are no longer the dominant species. The Arctic decides the rules, not us. It feels like the end of the world. And perhaps that's exactly why Norway chose this place for one of humanity's greatest insurance policies. Hidden inside a frozen mountain, behind thick concrete walls, beneath layers of Arctic permafrost, stands a single steel entrance. Simple, unassuming, almost easy to miss. Yet, behind that door rests one of civilization's greatest treasures. Millions of seeds, collected from nearly every country on Earth. Rice, corn, wheat, beans, vegetables. Plants that feed billions of people, each carefully preserved in case disaster strikes somewhere else. War, disease, climate catastrophe, crop failure. If humanity ever loses part of its agricultural future, the backup waits here in silence. Think about what that says. Norway could have built almost anything here. A luxury Arctic resort, a giant national monument, an extravagant symbol of wealth. Instead, it built a vault. Not for itself, for everyone, for people who may never visit Norway, for generations that do not yet exist. The Seed Vault is not really about seeds, it's about philosophy. The same philosophy that created the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Protect today, prepare for tomorrow, think beyond yourself. Whether it's money or food, Norway's instinct remains remarkably consistent. Save, preserve, share. Standing here at the edge of the Arctic, it's almost impossible not to notice something. The richest country in modern history keeps expressing its wealth by protecting things instead of displaying them. Money, nature, seeds, trust. The greatest investments Norway has ever made are not designed to impress anyone. They're designed to outlive people. But perhaps the greatest luxury Norway has created is not hidden in a vault or invested in global markets. It's something far simpler, something almost invisible. A way of life that many countries have forgotten is even possible. Imagine asking the people of one of the richest countries on Earth, "What do you do with all that money?" You might expect answers like bigger houses, luxury cars, private islands. Instead, many Norwegians will probably answer with something much simpler. We go outside. There is a Norwegian word, friluftsliv, literally open-air life. But the translation misses its meaning. Friluftsliv is not hiking or camping, it's not a hobby, it's a philosophy. The belief that human beings are healthiest when they spend time in nature. Not occasionally, regularly, whether it's raining, snowing, or far below freezing. In Norway, babies often nap outside in winter, bundled safely inside their strollers, breathing cold, fresh air. School children spend entire days outdoors. Families disappear into the mountains every weekend, not because they're escaping civilization, but because this is civilization. Nature isn't somewhere you visit, it's somewhere you belong. Across Norway, hundreds of simple mountain cabins wait for hikers. Wooden walls, bunk beds, a small stove. Nothing luxurious. Many are not even locked. You arrive, spend the night, leave payment in a small honesty box, and then continue your journey. Think about that. Unlocked cabins in one of the richest countries on Earth. Not because theft is impossible, because trust is expected. trust has become infrastructure. Norway did not spend its fortune building monuments. It invested in something much harder to build: confidence, security, a society where strangers assumed the best about one another. And perhaps that's the rarest luxury of all. Every nation eventually faces a moment when its values are tested. For Norway, that day arrived in July 2011. A terrorist attack shocked the country. Lives were lost, families were shattered. A nation known for peace suddenly found itself confronting unimaginable grief. Moments like these often change countries forever. History is full of governments responding to tragedy with fear, expanding surveillance, restricting freedoms, demanding revenge. Many believed Norway would follow the same path. Instead, the country's response surprised the world. Its leaders spoke not about hatred, but about democracy. Not about revenge, but about openness. Justice followed its course through ordinary legal institutions. The attacker was treated as a defendant, not elevated into the spectacle he sought. The focus remained on the victims, their families, and the values the country chose to preserve. That response was not accidental. By now, it should feel familiar. Throughout this journey, we've seen the same pattern again and again. The merchant who built no palace, the road that followed the mountain, the trillion-dollar fund that refused to spend itself, the fisherman who never flaunted his success, the seed vault built for strangers. Different stories, the same instinct: restraint. Not because Norwegians lack ambition, but because they believe principles matter most when they are hardest to keep. Character is not revealed when life is easy, it's revealed when everything is at risk. And in that moment, Norway chose to remain Norway. For more than 50 years, Norway has achieved something many believed impossible. It became astonishingly wealthy without allowing wealth to redefine the country. But every generation inherits a different challenge. The oil will not last forever. The giant fields beneath the North Sea are gradually declining. One day, the last commercial barrel will be pumped. Norway has prepared for that moment better than perhaps any nation in history. That's exactly why the Sovereign Wealth Fund exists. If everything goes according to plan, the transition will happen almost quietly. The country will not become poorer overnight. It will simply begin living from the returns on decades of careful planning. Like a family that saved diligently for retirement. But there is another challenge, one that no investment fund can solve: culture. Today's young Norwegians have never experienced a poor Norway. To them, wealth is not extraordinary. It's normal. They're growing up in the same global culture as everyone else. Social media, luxury brands, celebrity lifestyles, a world where success is increasingly measured by visibility. And that creates an uncomfortable question. Can humility survive permanent prosperity? Nobody knows, not even Norway, because every generation must decide which traditions deserve to continue, because that's the country's greatest risk, not running out of oil, but forgetting the lessons learned before the oil was ever found. Throughout this film, we've visited towering fjords, Arctic islands, ancient fishing villages, and one of the largest investment funds ever created. But perhaps none of those are Norway's greatest achievement. Its greatest achievement is psychological. For one brief chapter of history, a nation discovered unimaginable wealth and somehow resisted allowing wealth to become its identity. That has happened remarkably few times. Long after the oil is gone, the mountains will remain. The fjords will still reflect the morning sky. The cabins will still wait beside quiet trails. The cod will still return each winter. And perhaps, if Norway succeeds, its greatest inheritance will not be measured in dollars. It will be measured in values: restraint, trust, responsibility, enough. We began this journey with a mystery. How could one of the richest countries on earth look almost ordinary? Now we know the answer. Because Norway never believed wealth was something to display. It believed wealth was something to protect, to share, to pass forward. In a world constantly telling us that success should be louder, Norway quietly suggests the opposite. That perhaps the strongest societies are not the ones that own the most, but the ones that need to prove it the least. So the next time someone asks you what real wealth looks like, do not picture a skyscraper. Do not picture a supercar. Picture a still fjord at sunrise, a modest wooden cabin, a fisherman heading to sea before dawn, a bicycle leaning outside an office that manages trillions of dollars. Because sometimes the greatest display of wealth is having no desire to display it at all. If this documentary changed the way you think about prosperity, leave a comment with one word that describes real wealth to you. And if you enjoy documentaries that reveal the hidden stories behind places, civilizations, and the forces shaping our world, subscribe and join us for the next journey.